My guest today is Andrea Binasco. Andrea is the co-founder of Sefirot, a publishing house of a few amazing creative tools. They have 50,000 users all over the world, and I'm one of them. I have discovered Sefirot through Cicero, their deck of cards for public speaking, and I purchased all their other decks since then. Andrea is a teacher, an author, and more generally a creative. It was beautiful to hear about his creative process, their plans for Sefirot, and also to test some of our ideas with him. In this episode, we talk about fueling the creative process through cards, insights on the creative process, and linearity and chaos in the creative journey. What most fascinated me when I found the deck was the fact that you were applying a principle that is important to me now, which is give the tools to people so that they can fix themselves and make it as easy as possible, like a Montessori teacher would do with children. You put the box, they can pick up the box and have their entire activity on their own without any adult or external intervention. That's what really compelled me. So congrats on the great work. And it would be nice to hear from you in a nutshell who you are and what Sefiro is and what you're trying to do at the moment.
Yeah, totally. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for the Cicero appreciation. It's really important for us because that's exactly what we are trying to do. So we try to give easy access to structures, and we try to teach people in the most natural way possible. A couple of things about Sefirot and about us. Basically, it's two of us in Sefirot. It's me and Matteo Di Pascale. We used to be schoolmates. We were in the same classroom at high school, and we used to have similar interests. Then we basically split ways after the end of the high school because he studied design and I studied literature, Italian literature. I became a teacher and he became a designer. And then, of course, we kept in touch. And we used to do those long conversations about things. And that's why I like also about your podcast ideas, because we've always been people, friends in general, that used to talk and talk, especially when we were teenagers, to try to solve the world's problems and understand things, of course, in a very naive way. Anyway, so during those conversations, we started thinking that it was a pity not to do something together because we felt so well while working and speaking. So basically, that's it. And he already developed Intuiti, that was a creative card deck based on tarots. And then we said, all right, what's your expertise? What's my expertise? What we can do? And we did Fabula, that is a tool for writing, basically.
Storytelling, yeah.
For storytelling, that gives a structure. And that was the beginning. Then, of course, at the beginning, nobody listened to us. And then, so we decided to go by ourselves. But for us, it was quite the case because nobody wanted to produce Fabula. So we said, let's do it by ourselves. At the beginning, it was just a game. And that's what we did. We opened Sefirot, that is a publishing house. And then slowly it became our work. So he's still a designer, of course, but he dropped the clients. I dropped the school. This year is the first year for me in which I'm not teaching. And
Congratulations.
Yeah, actually, I'm missing it, of course, because I do love it. But now we are full time on that. And that's it. Our struggle basically is to express ourselves in the belief that we may help other people. The story of Cicero also is quite interesting because we didn't want to do that. A public speaking expert came to us, and we already had just 2 days before that, we were speaking about Fabula, and we said, maybe we should do something about public speaking. And I said, if we do that, we're going to call it Cicero because I like the name. We found the name before the product. And then this public expert called us and said, well, we don't do something about public speaking. So Cicero was born. We are able at the moment to do what we like, and that's wonderful. Yeah.
Lovely. You spoke about natural ways, and you were saying maybe we talk about it later. So let's talk about it before we forget. Can you share a little bit more? Is it related to the Montessori method?
No, it's not consciously. Of course, being a teacher, I had the possibility to explore and to try several methods. I used to teach adults, actually, so I'm not into youngster education. But our idea is that basically there's a long way to simplification. So what we try to do is to learn and actually live as much of the things we are putting out in order to simplify it, not oversimplifying. And that way we believe that we can give a tool. We believe that our things are tools. So what's a tool? A tool is something that is waiting for you, but we don't tell you how to use it. Basically, you have to handle it and to try out. And that's Montessori. So because our focus is not to do Cicero and then sell the
Training.
course in order to use it. Our goal is to give Cicero and let people use it also in a different way from the one we thought of, till the point in which he doesn't need it. We want to create something that is useful as education, useful while you're doing that, but at what point it becomes part of your luggage and you can just leave it at home. And every time you are doing that, you will remember this as well. So
Why would a teacher like you decide not to teach and let the tool teach?
because the most joyful thing in teaching is when people don't need you anymore. Of course, there's a process to get there, but when you find in your student the fact that they are able now to work on their legs and they are able also to change what you said and to digest it and put it out in a different way. In Italy, training is something like I tell you what's right and you listen and you take notes and then you forget it. Basically, that's the risk. Of course, the ideal thing is to have a path with your students and to share things. That's something that we miss because we sell a thing and that's it. So we don't get in touch. We get in touch with some people, luckily, like you, but that's not common.
How about the conversations you were having as teenagers with Matteo, right? His name is Matteo.
Yeah, Matteo and other friends.
So both in terms of the format and the type of topics you were covering, was it feeding already what he did with Intuiti, what you guys did with Fabula? Or it was completely unrelated and you were going in many directions?
So we were very lucky because in high school we had very good teachers. So we're speaking about teaching now. We had very good teachers and they taught us basically to think. So we used to try to understand things, and there were those long conversations in which you're doing nothing. We had a lot of free time, and so basically at night in bars and smoking cigarettes and speaking about what would people need, what were our beliefs about teenager years and things like that. That's, I think, and you tell me, I think that is something that most people do. I don't know, but I don't know if you have a similar experience, but there were those long conversations about things. And slowly they create boundaries with our friends, and we started experimenting, doing things for them. I'm saying that because at Christmas, for instance, we were working together before working together, because when we were giving, so for Christmas, we used to give as a gift basically products that we made. So we used to, in November, to meet, me and Matteo, and do things like agendas or anything like that to our friends. So it was first start, with Hinder side, of course.
Yeah, it's always been there.
Yeah. So it makes us feel well, basically. So, but
Lovely.
still, yeah.
Do you run workshops?
We do. It's not our main focus, though. So we do that if we are asked to. We love it. And we use our tools, of course, to do that. So we do storytelling workshops. We never did a creativity workshop. If that was the question. No, we didn't. For now, we are just in storytelling. Of course, we share our process, our things, but just related to the decks. Some of our products are very technical. So just like editor, that is for editing for editors.
And so when people go to your workshop, are they going with a creative goal, or are they going with the goal of learning the tool?
Most of the time, they're going with a practical goal. I have a book, I have to analyze it and improve it, for instance. With Intuiti, it's different because Intuiti is more holistic. That's what we really love as well. And for instance, Matteo every Wednesday in his house does Intuiti sessions that are not structured at all. So basically, whoever wants to come comes, and they just throw cards. I'm going as a guest. That are his workshops, basically.
And any interest at the moment to do those workshops like as a structured curriculum online, for instance? You could have something already automated so that you have to do so much leg work, and then it would run on its own and you can always support the community, but it's running itself. Because in a way, this is kind of a guided step-by-step, so you can just put it online as a new kind of media.
Yes, that's a possibility. So we've been speaking about that, but we never found a way to do that, basically. So probably it's not the correct time. And also there's just the two of us. Now we're trying to hire people to help us in those things. So for now, we are just like always struggling between the many things that we would like to do and the things that realistically we can endeavor. So for now, it's of a path that we can definitely go along, but for the moment, we've not been able to do that.
What are your main learnings on how people can do their best work?
Wow. Yeah, there are so many. I can say what are the main learnings on how I can do my best work for starting. And those are the things that I've learned, that I'm learning because I used to have a different work. So when you teach, you are very responsible, but also in a very safe environment because you know what's your job. When you start to be an entrepreneur or you start to do things like that, a designer, for instance, you don't know what's going to be the future of the things you're doing, what's going to be the future of your company. So the thing that it may sound like common sense, but for me, it was not to overthink and to just, from one end, follow intuition. So do what you like to do. And from the other hand, don't be narcissistic and understand that if something doesn't work, it doesn't work. So those are my two main struggles. So for me, what I've learned is that I have to constantly put into question what I've been doing with actual data. So if Cicero is not working because all the people is not happy about that, I don't have to cry on myself. That was difficult at the beginning. And the other side, if we think that we should do a workshop, but we never do that, at some point you have to say, oh, that's not mine. That's not my path. So I either find someone that does workshop for me, or we basically don't do that. So those were my two learnings. And then there's how to allow people from the other side of the product to actually take profit out of it. Profit meaning take value out of it. That's UX designing, basically. You have to be the most empathetic with them. Empathy. And also not to oversimplify, because I think that you have to give this sense of achievement when using a tool. Because if it's too simple, it gets boring and it doesn't stretch the person to its potential. So for me, it has to be a little bit complicated as well. It's not just do a thing that the user want. It's more try to provoke it in order for them to just don't be completely comfortable. That's the point. Because when you speak about UX design, sometimes you think that the user has to be just like sitting there and having a ChatGPT to write his tool. That's obviously not the case. It's just like a stupid thought, but that's, for me, it's more giving them a little bit of dark sides in order for them to actually work. Yeah.
Gotcha. So, in terms of creativity, you were speaking about how do I choose my projects, or how do I know when I need to work or not work on something? And it was really inner work, which is, do I feel like doing it? And the other one was, is the market or are the indicators telling me whether it's good or not? Now, let's say that you know what you want to work on, and you have very much clarity on what are the next 2 weeks. Let's say what needs to happen in the next 2 weeks. How do you help yourself get there?
I wouldn't say that I have a method. The question is, how do I basically achieve what I want to achieve in a daily basis, more or less?
But in a great way. For me, the level of quality that you deliver in your products is high. You're not improvising something. It's not half-baked products. It's really good. Especially the Cicero one, that's a really beautiful benchmark. You're achieving amazing work. And so the question is more like, okay, you have those 2 weeks and you want to do something as good as Cicero. How do you do it? What's your process with Matteo?
First of all, 2 weeks are not enough.
Yeah.
We take our time, and you try it on yourself and on other people. It takes a long time for us. We, as a company, have the value of doing things that are durable. So that's our main struggle. That's our unique value proposition. Doing deep stuff. That's what we want to do. Of course, if we can, that's where we strive. So we take our time, first of all. Then there are two things. There's the process, and the process is quite manageable. We know how to do a deck of cards. We know some technicalities that help people using cards, and those are more or less the same for every deck of cards that we do. So there's the process, and that's quite easy. From designing to production, we have a path that we follow. But then our constant question is that enough, or is that little bright side, that little thing that can improve it and that transforms it from a deck of prompts? And that's perfectly fine. There are companies that do that very well, but that's not what we want to do, to an actual method. And that thing, you have to wait for it.
It's the wow factor. You're talking about a wow factor.
Yeah, kind of wow factor. Yeah, exactly. Not because it's wow, but because it's deeper. That depth, of course, it's not always possible to achieve it. We always strive to it. We have to wait for it, basically. So we wait for it.
It feels, sorry, I'm interrupting you, but it feels a story within the deck as well. It's like the wow factor of the deck would be that there's an overarching story that you can pick up from using the cards. You know,
that's your experience in it, probably. I don't know if that was the thing, but
yeah, it is.
When we speak about tarot, because we don't do tarot as the divination, but we use cards, we use intuitive, and we always say that to really understand them, to really understand the archetype, you have to live it, basically. You have to put it on. And that's what we try to do. So we try to actually experience what we put into the deck. But to do that, it's a long way. It takes a lot of time. So we have projects that are half made, but they are not satisfying. And so basically they are there. We have that big box of projects, and we don't go there just like looking for the next one. We wait for it, basically. Of course, we do things while we wait. We read things, we speak, we talk to other people. Business-wise, is not so good because it's very difficult to have so few products and to still manage to have a company, because most of the business models of companies like ours, publishing, is long tail, having a lot of products, so putting them out at a very fast pace, and of course the quality would drop a little bit. So we are there struggling, and that's what happens when you do something because you want to, not because you need it. And that's how we started. But now we need to do that as well because that's our job. So we are there at the, yeah.
That's why probably the path of the workshops on top of the existing decks is probably the easiest way to stay in your heart while growing the numbers, the revenue.
Yeah, that's true. That's a possible thing.
Love it. And when you look at people using your decks and being creative on their own projects, what are the commonalities? What do you see help people do better work or do more work or be more fulfilled in what they do?
So we take Fabula and Cicero. The first help that they get from the tool is the structure. So because there's this blank page syndrome that people have. So that's the very first thing. You say to them, that's an efficient way. You have steps to follow. And that's the first thing. And then when they start to learn it, they start to see possibilities. And that's beautiful because then they ask questions and they disagree with something you say. The debate opens, and that's beautiful, especially for storytelling. There are things that everybody knows without knowing. Nobody knows. They know. The hero journey is something that everybody knows without knowing. So when you show it, they are just like, wow, it's like they discover something about themselves. And that's beautiful. Of course, for any storyteller, that's common knowledge. But people that use the deck, they don't. And kids as well. We did Fabula for kids, so they already know things, of course, because they see the movies, because that's how human being tells a story. So they know it, but they don't know how to. At least they know how to as well, but to find something that tells them that, that's beautiful. So that's where they start to be more creative, and that's what we like. But of course, there's the structure part that is important as well, because otherwise you get crazy. You just don't know where to start, or you don't know where to end, and so it's all messy.
And in terms of behavior or attitudes, beliefs about the world, what do you think works in creativity and what do you think doesn't work?
It's a pity to start with the bad things, but the first thing that came into my mind is that people sometimes are very envious about the creativity process. I think that is because, at least in Italy, to be creative, it's not such a value. So there's this strange association between creativity, art, and being not responsible. So if you're creative, you're an artist, so you don't function so well in terms of efficiency. For instance, we have this product for editors that is called Editor, and is about editing a book, so improving a book. We constantly receive very angry feedbacks from people that never used it because they feel threatened. And that's very stupid. It's just, again, strategy, because they spoke about artificial intelligence, saying there will be a point in which artificial intelligence will write books. There will be a point in which, so they don't see the creative part of that. They just see the threat. That's what happens sometimes. And that's something that really hinders creativity, in my opinion, because it stops you from basically stealing the things that you then will be able to put together in a different way and put out. And that's a thing that I have, of course, because when I see something really beautiful, really, when someone makes something that is really, wow, I wish I would have done that, there's this little feeling of envy, basically, of
Why didn't I think about it before? Something like
exactly. Why? And then you say it's surely crap because it's not possible. So they're selling me something that is just crap. That's natural. I have it. I don't know if you do.
I do.
I don't know if everyone does, but I do.
But it's part of us. The question is that I think we all have the voice. The question is, do we listen to it or not?
Yeah, exactly. So you have, for me, it was an actual work on myself. To do benchmark, for me, it's very difficult because I have to look at things that are well made. And there's this kind of angry party that says, oh, something exists that is well done, that is not mine. I don't know. It's this feeling. For me, it's difficult. I was speaking about that at the beginning as well. That's what I've learned, that you have to see the beautiful things because they actually are the steps that you can work on to get to do other beautiful things. And so that's the thing that hinders creativity, in my opinion, from people. One of many things. Then there's the fear of expressing themselves and the fear of how what they've done will be perceived. And then there's the thing that helps creativity to stop judgment and to play in a world.
Yeah, sorry. The second part come from the first one, right? Because
Yeah.
everything you describe are fear. So just disconnect the fear, and which is judgment, and then boom, you're good. So disconnect the ego. Super easy. Thank you, Andrea.
yeah. Now everybody will do that, and we will live in a world of creativity.
Love it. Okay, imagine you go to this kind of resort where we go there to create. And just like a Montessori room for kids, where you have at your level, you can pick up any box. And I imagine right now you have 5 or 6 boxes at Sefirot, but you have entire walls of boxes. That room is creativity. And you have hundreds of boxes for different problems. So one is public speaking, there's editor for editing your book, there's the storytelling one. And people just go there. They have like different tables. Every table has the right size so that any deck can be opened properly. And just people have fun there. Why don't we have this already?
That's beautiful. Because if you go there and you choose the thing that you like, you won't do anything good. So there's, and if
I didn't get you. If you do
Yeah,
the things that you like,
you won't do anything creative.
okay.
I'm being provocative. The thing that came into my mind while you were speaking was that room was great. I would love to be in there, but I would sit on the least comfortable chair and take the thing that would be the farthest from me in that place. So what I'm saying is that if you let people, I don't know how to express it in a reasonable way, but even if the space has changed, then people would still stick to their kind of comfort zone. That room should be a little bit frightening as well. So I don't know if you got it.
I get you. I get the point that if I go in a room and there are different games, if I'm a marketer, I might pick up the marketing game, and then the risk that I see is that I might compare what I know and my process to the process and then validate. I would just validate what is there and or judge like you were expressing before of envious. I could have created this card, and then closing the deck and go do something else. I think that's the worst interaction that you can have, but that's possible. I probably set you up in a way that didn't show the value of the room, but the idea is that you enter the room with an intention. So you have a need. I think that if there's the need, then there's no that room is perfect in itself. In my mind, first you clarify your intention, you're clear on what you want, and then you enter the room. It's like paradise for you because one of those boxes or many of those boxes will have the answers to the problems that you bring with you.
Yeah, definitely. With the intention, you're right. It changes the thing because then you have tools.
What do we need for you to do this?
What do we?
Yeah, exactly. Ideally, you sell the wall, right? Why this room doesn't exist yet?
That's true. That it should exist. I don't know. Did you do your benchmark?
And I think people have books and libraries is the way to. I think this is the next level of library because the library, the book is amazing, but it takes so much work to read the book, right? Joseph Campbell to read the Hero with a Thousand Faces. I prefer Fabula and get the shortcut if I have a creative endeavor right now. And I think also it's empowering people to do their first step. As you said at the beginning, most difficult thing is the first step. And if my first step is to read the book, then I will finish the book and I will not have done the work. And then you need to go back and do the work. Hopefully, this is version 2 of libraries instead of having ChatGPT and we don't have libraries anymore and we don't care about anything and everything is on our phone. In my mind, is for creative endeavors, we need this kind of new kind of spaces.
That would be beautiful. Yeah, that would be beautiful. Really, I don't know why it doesn't exist actually, because that's very empowering and it brings out the real strength of humans, because basically it's association. Creativity is, for me, is putting together things. So if you have a lot of things to put together, who knows what comes out, and you have an intention, that's crucial. Otherwise, you are lost. Yeah, we should do that.
I think that's a pathway for you. Yeah. Actually, one of the things that I've been doing is starting to do cards as well for improvisation workshops and different things that I try to teach through the retreats. My path is there as well. I need to do cards. And then I need to have cards from people that I trust. I got some from you. I got from psychological experts that have created decks as well. There are many decks that are useful. The question is, how do you put together the experience so that it's consistent and people know what each box means? Because you would have a section with communication, and then you would have all the boxes for communication. How do you know which deck to create? And then for each deck, how do you know which key ideas you should keep and not to oversimplify, remove too many, but at the same time not surface some that are not good enough? And also, you have so many different methodologies. Why do you choose one methodology instead of the other one? So for the hero with 1,000 faces, It's quite obvious because I feel that's the one model. But if you were looking at personalities, for instance, personality testing, you have so many different frameworks that have been created by so many different experts. Which one do you choose? For instance, that one, I've not found the answer. For the one with the storytelling, probably I would follow the same deck, the same method that you have. So in my mind, there's this big question of mapping the entire territory and then choosing the right things before you put it into your process of creating the beautiful design and the user experience.
There are, again, things that we do with a method and things we do without a method. So with a method, we create a product. So we start basically from a need. Of course, public speaking is a need that has to be fulfilled. People need things that help them with public speaking. So that's, of course, a thing. And that's quite normal in the process of designing. How then there's, again, as a teacher, you need to know what you teach. So the whole process is influenced by our expertise and our lives. So we pick those things that communicate with us. I couldn't do something about designing spaces because that's not something that I've experimented. When we need to do something like that, our process that is very young, so it's just like the beginning, but is to ask someone to show us how they work and taking notes, basically. So we try to steal the expertise. Steal, of course, it's in a good way. And that's it. And then how we choose among many possible methods. And also here, there are different things. One is, for instance, we've just did something about business aware design, about design, and there we try to be the more holistic possible. So we try to say, in our opinion, what is missing is the big picture, because when we design something, we have to think what we want to do, who will be the user, what will be the business model, and things like that. So we try to put all those things together. That's one way. So trying to take things from there, from then, the most useful ones, so the most ancient one, the most typical ones, and put them together. Or basically completely, I shouldn't say that, but it's, so why we choose the hero with 1,000 faces or the hero journey? Well, basically because it happened. Of course, we are aware of many other possibilities, but that's the one that crossed our path and that worked better. So we went for it. Of course, it will help people, some people. Other people won't be helped by that. They would have been helped by the character's art, or I think ancient Korean structure about storytelling that is much less confrontational and much less Western. I cannot judge it, but that's the feeling that I have. So we may have gone with that, but that was not the case. So it's
so the Korean one, just very interesting. So the Korean one would be more, so our version is a clash and a struggle and all these things, and the Korean one is more like a Zen kind of thing where everything flows.
That's the Western perception. I mean, that's why I got it. Of course, I may be saying biased things, but that was my feeling looking at that.
Interesting.
It's just like philosophy. If you take tarot, they are one thing. If you take I Ching, they are another thing. For us, tarots, they are more comfort zone, and I Ching are not. So that's why we did tarots and not I Ching. Then the very beautiful thing that we would like to do is to get even deeper, because there are similarities between tarot and I Ching, for instance, between the hero's journey, the character arcs, between those things. And the deeper you go, that gives a key that you can use in many doors, even culturally. That would be beautiful. I've studied linguistics as well. And that's a thing that is very popular in linguistics, to try to get to the root of the words, but of language in general. So it's, since all we do is language, the hero journey is language, the Cicero is language, and the tarots are a language. There are some universal concepts. So, of course, we don't work striving to them, but we try to mix and match things in order to see if there's something that can work on the broader basis. That's just chatting, actually, because that's our kind of philosophy. It's not that we work like that, of course. When we do Cicero, we are much more structured than how I'm speaking. But still, the fascinating thing is that sometimes something glimpses out that works very well. And that thing, it's the thing that probably is the more connected to us. And that's what we look for. I don't know.
I totally resonate with the deep process that you want to go through. If you have unlimited resources, it's probably the most interesting thing to do, is to take all the different decks. I think the power of the hero's journey is that many people will have some kind of a feeling for it. It requires less of an onboarding. And if you go very deep, I think you will have a very hard work to do to get to that depth and understanding the whole thing. And then you will have a lot of work too in terms of UX design and language to put it into words that people can actually understand.
Yeah. It's going up and down. So you go up the hill, and that's the hero journey. You go up the hill and you learn things up the hill, and then you have to get down to simplify it because you have to teach the next heroine about that. So you have to, but that's teaching as well. So when I teach history, I teach Napoleon. So I've been studying Napoleon in university for 1 year, and I've read 10 books about him. And I've been to the Museum of Napoleon, and I've bought a coin with his face on, and I've been visiting France, and that's all my part. Then I go into the classroom and I just say Napoleon was born that day, and he was from Corsica. How do you say Corsica?
Yeah, Corsica, yeah.
Corsica, and that's very simple. But the more you've studied it, the best is your lesson, even if you're not bringing all your experience into that because there's no time. That thing, it comes out. So it's this process of teaching that I like. Of course, you cannot do that for everything, but you have to simplify because of time and because of interest of the other person. But the more you know about that, the more you experience that, the best will be your simplification, more or less.
Yeah. But at the same time, because you're in a teaching process, ideally you don't want to simplify, right? You want to give them the whole thing. And it's you don't know what Napoleon is. You don't.
You have to give them the how do you say, the will
To carry on.
to go on their leg.
Yeah.
So you have to give them, because there's no way you can share. And even if you share whatever, it will be your knowledge, not their. So you don't want them to repeat what you said. So
you just want to share the enthusiasm.
Yeah, exactly. You use the topic to teach something that is not the topic, that is the process. So that's why, as a teacher, I work in this company, basically. So that's because Matteo is a designer, and he is very good at what you said before. So you have to take action in order to make the tool effective. And that's very difficult because you have a lot of things and you have to put down the essentials, you have to make it usable, and that's very difficult. I'm not good at that. The thing that I the balance is because I try to bring this idea of teaching into the deck. And that's actually something that I've never coded. So I thank you for your questions, because now it's a little bit more clear now that I told you. It's not something that I already possessed. It's the very first time that I've seen the relation between my practice into classrooms and my practice into designing things. But it's that. So to give a simplified version that can be enriched by the other person, but that has very solid grounds, because that's another important thing. You cannot do something on sand. That's not what we want to do. Just build a deck of cards about personalities. Oh yeah, let's Google the Enneagram and let's put it into cards.
And the gene keys and all the other ones. Yeah,
exactly.
Interesting. And so what's the relationship with Matteo? So you are, if I understand correctly, your process is you are the one who's basically exploring the whole thing. You're both exploring the whole thing, but you put together some kind of essence and then you give it to him and he basically cuts it even further, right?
We tend to work a lot together. And work means we tend to speak a lot together. And then the actual tasks, it depends. So sometimes I write the booklet, for instance. Sometimes I do the research. Sometimes he does, according to our experience. Of course, the design part, it was mostly on him of the last tool. The kid deck, it was mostly on me. But then, so we work together on it. But the fact is that we constantly, and that's a thing that is another limit, because it's just the two of us. So we are currently looking to broaden our team, because it's not realistic that two people can do.
All of
I
it.
mean, yeah, can do always them, and people knowing each other. So the risk is to become very redundant, very
To echo each other.
Exactly. But that's how we work. We have a good dynamic, of course, so we are lucky. And so anyway, we roles are very going up and down. The creative process is sharing thoughts, basically, and see if they work, and experimenting it. And then there's the process part. Yep.
Because we're talking about cards, it brings me to an interesting topic. So I initially thought that there were two archetypes within your relationship, right? But what you tell me is not really the case. You are switching and you do different things. And so it leads me to thinking having different cards of roles for a company, for instance, and say, okay, this is the person that thinks only about people. This is the person who thinks only about visual, blah, blah, blah. You can have as many cards as you want. And then it's a way to avoid the problem that you talk about. Obviously, you want to grow the company, have more people, and have more resources to build more decks and have this beautiful world we talked about. But if you're restricted, because it creates the thinking hats of Debono, you can describe the personality. That's what I do for improvisation, and say, okay, you're the person that actually thinks everything is negative and is critical about everything. If you don't have it in the team, then you might lose some good insights of someone criticizing you before it goes to the markets. I don't do it because I want to teach people to be critical, for instance, for that card, but I want to see the interaction between that person and someone who's very optimist and see how they clash on stage. So I'm more interested in the relationship and the learning from that interaction. But from a deck of card perspective, that would be very useful as well in terms of, hey, you're a one-man show, you're a freelancer, and you need to do all these different things. You need to be a marketer, then take the card of the marketer and you're going to work as a marketer, blah, blah, blah. So just as an idea.
Yeah, that will be helpful, because to do it in a structured way. So cards, again, they give you structure. So sometimes we forget to wear the black hat or the yellow hat, of course. So, of course, there are traits. Also, Matteo and me, I wear that hat more. And also about leadership, the same thing. So there's always the person that takes that the leader, there's always the follower and the exchange, but sometimes you miss it. And that's another problem. You can apply that to leadership, I think, while you were speaking, because sometimes that's the worst case scenario when you don't get a leader. So sometimes you have to remember it. And yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, it can actually work, and giving structure as well. It's more, yeah.
And the beauty of these cards as well is that you can layer them, right? Because you were talking about the leadership bit. You can layer trauma, you can layer personality traits, you can layer the hero's journey, where in my journey I am right now.
Yep.
And then you can create complexity in the character. So if you were doing a very complex character, the author would be able to give you all those different details. But they actually just one line. If you do a database, it would just be a number of lines with different characteristics for each line.
Yeah. And the goal, again, that's the intention, would be to actually empower the work or creative process by role play, basically.
Yeah. So the reason why I'm doing all these things on my side is to deconstruct the ego.
Oh,
because
yeah.
what we are is just a story, right? We are just a story that we practice so much that we become so good at it that we think we are this story. And so as you deconstruct the story and you get people to play with different components, the main mood that you have, or the way you categorize the world as well, like personal constructs, like you see someone, you're like, is this person rich or poor? Is this person smart or dumb? Like you can judge people based on personal constructs, and the way they judge the world is the way they are. Can I get people to play with those different things so that when they see it in themselves and in people, they're just like, oh yeah, that's the ego playing with me, and I want to play with a different one today, a different card. Yeah.
That of course would be part of the person, but they don't know. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah. So I've hundreds of cards.
Yeah, that's the point.
Yeah, it's a lot. One thing that I'm very interested in is your own path, like spiritual path, let's say. So it's more okay, if you go deep into your journey, you were talking to me about shamanism, but if I don't go that far, what you're talking about in language is the storytelling bit is the most spiritual part of language and literature, because there's this kind of progress and there's a yearning for something else, and you can take that yearning just to, okay, I want to change my life, or I want to go beyond life, let's say. So what led you there? What is there a connection there? What are you doing on your side to explore further?
Yeah,
it's asked very clumsily. I don't ask this
no,
question.
I got it. There's a need. Again, there's always the intention at the beginning. So what happened to me is that at some point I had the need to explore a little that a need of religion, basically. So religion in the sense of spiritualism, of deeper connection. And basically that's it. But I think it's very universal and common for people. The hero journey, for instance, and if you lay down the tarots, if you lay down the hero journey, if you think about shamanic journey and all those things, there's always this strive to get a little bit to know yourself more and to do a path. And that's very messy, because when you look at it, you tend to find it everywhere. For me, it's something that the way we are built. So we tend to look at those things. I have the need to explore that part of myself. And that part of myself meaning anything. That means the intuition and the feeling that I have, not the thoughts and the bad feelings that I have. That's the idea. It is not that is my hat, my character. It's more just I tend to see those things and to be attracted by those things, being questions about yourself and the knowledge that to get to a knowledge of things, you have to walk a path, basically. And then there's the things that if it works, for me, it works. So as a personal story, Matteo was lucky enough to meet a mentor that was one of his university teachers. He met it at university, that introduced it, with whom she's a woman, with whom he worked on intuitive. So he started this kind of personal growth path there. And then with the contact with Matteo, I started to explore it a little bit. I don't want to simplify it too much, but it's just like going to the gym. Because going to the gym is something that is very difficult, but makes you feel well. And you have the sense that your body is made to be used. And it feels better when you use it. Having those kind of interests and those kind of practices, it helps me, so I do them. But I'm not into a system. When I was young, I used to go to the mass and follow, and a Christian actually, culturally. But that wasn't enough for me, because it was just like giving away responsibility, in my opinion. And so I had the need to feel a little bit more responsible for myself. And the idea that you are actually walking down a path and you can change direction, I like it. That's why I like the hero journey. And the hero journey, by the way, comes from myths, and myths are religion before the book. For me, it's very true. Let's say like that. I don't know if this was your questions, and also I just like.
Yeah, you're answering. My question is not really concrete. The hero's journey, it goes way beyond just the specific quest that we all see. The pattern is a pattern for growth, a pattern for striving for something else. And so that caught my interest, because for me, shamanism, the little I know about shamanism is go beyond the ego to journey towards the true self. The hero's journey is the same thing. It's just usually a component of your true self that you go towards. And unfortunately, the quest is always a little bit. It's the love, or the get the peace, or self-confidence. And we never get to the point where we understand that it's a full blossomed individual that is at the end of all the years journey, and
Exactly.
it's missing. It's like the tree that hides the forest, I feel, because we see all these Hollywood movies, there's a deep emotional resonance, and you're like, oh yeah, I can totally relate to this, and we see a glimpse of it, but it doesn't go deep enough, I feel. That would be my take on it. But that's the veil for me, and then I wanted to see what do you feel behind it.
Yeah, but so I'm not really yet into that. I'm just going up the surface, but this is relevant because that's what happens. Just going to the gym, I'll go down this very simple metaphor. There's a fear before going to the gym. There's a feeling of uneasiness,
Yeah.
and that's the same thing. So my struggle now is that I'd love to see what's behind this feeling, but I'm a little bit stuck into that. So I'm a little bit blocked. So I feel the urge to actually do some work on myself, but I'm still struggling. And that's the hero journey as well, because the important part is the part in which you face the cover. So you go to the dark. That's it. I think that is very common as a feeling. And so I think that most of people feel that they may go a little bit further in any practice they have, but they are restrained by themselves. And shamanism or the hero journey or any kind of practice, Kabbalah, whatever, after the moment in which you say, oh, wow, that's so cool, I would like to be one of them. And that's just like the stupid part. Then there's this little bump that you have to overcome. And that's where I am at the moment. So I'm not into it, but I feel really attracted by exploring my spirituality in a deeper way. One of the things that can be done is using tarot, shamanism, any kind of religion, anything.
Was Intuiti built for this as well, or it's more for the creativity part?
So the need was creativity. Matteo was at any university, and he was constantly asked to do creative things, but they didn't give him a method, of course, but he felt like going into circles. So he had the need to have a tool to help him overcome the ego. I have to do a work that is good to get a mark. I have to satisfy my client, that in the case was the professor, and to do something that could have connected him to a more meaningful practice. Again, with hindsight, meeting that person that I was speaking about, he was guided into the archetypical part of ourself. So he was guided into something like, if you want to detach with your ego, one way is to see if there are tools that speak by archetypes. So they are more than one. They are more than one person. And so he chose tarots, and he worked on the tarots. So Intuiti now is scalable because you can use it as a deck of cards for creativity. So I want to write a song, I pick a card that is a butterfly. How does it feel to me? And I work on that. But there's also the tarot part that is not for divination, but it's for self exploration, kind of.
I still have trouble with Intuiti because I feel like when I realized it was the tarot, it was a layer on top of the tarot. I was like, I have the tarot. Why don't I use the tarot instead? And then I was too busy to go through the deck or the booklet. So I didn't go in depth into Intuiti yet. But I will at some point. Cool. Is there anything that we didn't talk about and you feel that like that's a key thing that you do or that we should know about?
Wow. No, maybe the only thing that is related to where I am now is the fact that now I have to choose between being a teacher and being an entrepreneur. And this is maybe a fear that a lot of people have, because I have torn between a profession that I like and that is very stable, that can help me grow. And then there's this very creative job that is another thing that is about creativity. It's about choices as well. Maybe going into the part that is less comfortable for you, also for me, may work. To be creative, go where you don't feel so at ease. I don't know if it's a common knowledge, but
I'm way too much on that side of go against the flow and just fight it and make it difficult. So I'm actually trying to learn the opposite, the yin side of just go with the flow. Don't force it. I'm trying
okay.
to learn the opposite, but I think it depends where you are on the spectrum. I'm really young and pushy, and I actually realized last week that I actually seek challenge. I seek problems. Like everywhere where it doesn't flow, I'm going there because I want to fix it. And I need to learn to be going more with, okay, what flows there? Let's go there. Cool, man. In my mind, one of the reasons why the cards are so powerful instead of using it on Miro or other online tools is that we're always so connected to technology, and technology connects us to others, so other ideas. And even if there's no noise, let's say that they are the right ideas, they are not our ideas, or they are not what you were talking about earlier, which is I take all the different experiences in my life and I distill it into this beautiful juice that no one else can understand the way I can. And so when we keep consuming other people's juice, we understand a little bit of it, but we don't really understand it, even if we go very deep, because they access reality and we don't. We access a point of view of reality, let's say. And so to me, we need to stop being connected at some point. And the problem is that we are always connected, and it removes our ability to access our own juice and value it and say, this is my inner voice, or this is my own side of and this is the most true thing I can have in my life because I truly experience it. And so in my mind, we need more tools like yours because they enable us to shut up the computer and the phone, put ourselves on the table, and be us with the pencil and the paper, and there's no other voices. There's just ours. So to me, this is one of the reasons why also I like it. Now, obviously, you can argue that there are prompts, so the prompts are coming from a voice in itself, but let's simplify and say, okay, at least I deal with one voice, not 1,000. And it gives more space to my own, because once the prompt is over, because it's a short prompt, then I'm on my own. It's me only. And to me, the future of creativity is in this kind of tool where you can shut the noise, keep working, because there's this tension in me where I want to shut the noise and meditate, let's say, or be in a meditative state, but I also want to be creative. I'm trying to find all the tools that enable me to be in that center in myself, but in a contributing process where I actually produce something. So the question with this long introduction is, where do you see the future of creativity, but also teaching? And if you're very bold with Sefirot, because I think you can, if you dream, where do you see the world going, and where do you feel yourself called to do and serve?
Okay. Again, I'll bring up again my experience as a teacher, because you have, when you're a teacher, you connect with younger people, of course, and those will be the ones that will set trends. And I think and I speak again about language, because what is happening, in my opinion, is that there's a change in the language people are using. That's common sense. And specifically, we are moving from a linear way of telling things and telling stories and expressing ourselves to a messy way of doing that. And I say messy because I've been born in the linear part, but it's not that it's messy. So the way in which younger communicate and work inside the classroom, it may feel very chaotic, but it's also very creative, because it's just like your room. So they have access to a lot of things at the same time, and they can pick whatever they want. And so the things are not aligned. There's not a label. Just here, come here for mentoring, come here for personality, come here for creativity. It's more like that. So there's a big potential. And cards are more or less on that. They are slowly moving on that spectrum, because you can change, you can shuffle them.
Yeah.
So my feel is that we are going towards that sort of language. So probably in the future, I personally like to do one of the two things. One thing is to be stubborn and teach people the importance of linear thinking and of process, because that's the risk we may experience into this sort of environment in which we get constantly bombarded with things that are not linear. But linearity is important in some things. That's one thing. And the other one is to embrace it and wonder if there may be an empowerment or a tool that follows that sort of logic that is not random, because we don't get random things. We get a lot of things from out of the infinite possibilities and infinite messages we get. We do get something with a criterion, with a choice. So something that way, of course, it's not a complete answer, but the feeling is that things will be changing towards less linearity, to sum it up. And that thing is a beautiful thing in education, for instance, because it is actually where creativity is. When you get the first card, the first card means the magician in tarot. So that's the condition. You have the chaos that gives birth to things.
The creative soup.
Exactly, the creative soup. So if we are able to transform the noise into a soup, then, and if we had tools to do that, this could be very powerful. But at the same way, and that's again something that I've learned with my students, you cannot throw someone into the creative soup and wait for him to build a boat.
Emerge. Yeah. The linearity is easy to see. And then you were talking about chaos. So for a while, I didn't really know what you were talking about. And one of the things I would have asked is, so what form does it take? And I think at the end, you basically give an answer, which is basically many different points. So the idea would be to give tools for people to connect those points for themselves. Because initially, when you said this, in my mind, it was philosophically, it's the idea of that everything is happening at the same time in all the possible ways. The like infinity of possibilities are already happening, right? And so it's basically an infinity of linearities. And that's what came up to me. But we're not going to get to an answer. But what would you say the tool would do?
Because you get a lot of noise, but when you are able to switch from one thing to the other very quickly, so they understand themselves. I don't know how to say that. So it's just like a change of the language. It's when you read a book, but when you open a web page, that's very easy. That was the first step. You can jump from one thing to the other, and it has meaning. Those jumps have meanings, but they are not just about one thing. I don't know how to say. So probably a tool may be something that can, again, empower this constant jumping from one thing to the other. Because again, if creativity is putting things together, it's very difficult to put things together if you have to read one book and then read the other book and then summarize them and then think what are the common things between them. Oh, why don't I apply the hero journey to the lean process? So I read about the lean process, I read about the hero journey, I get things out of that, and so on. If with this kind of communication, I can have a peel of the hero journey and a peel of the lean process, and maybe I can connect two of those stages and build from there. So it's more like something that can generate ideas out of the constant noise, as you said. Because if you stay, of course, the being in my center and devoting myself to one thing, it's very important. But at the same time, the risk is that I'm missing something that is very valuable just because I don't like the fact that I get too much. It's just like being in front of a table and being annoyed by the fact that there's too many things to eat. That's my feeling as well. But then something that can guide through that, not in a linear way. I don't know, but it's just like a concept that
It's a crazy idea. The beautiful thing that you talked about, in my opinion, is the way we used to take in information, which is the book reading, and we could not buy so many books at the time. So you were stuck with one book for a week or even more time. And now the way we do it, which is more like the tab on our browser, we have so many tabs open and we You know the pattern of a website, so you know where to click to see the menu, and quickly you get your way. And it's an interesting thing to know how this impacts the way we connect ideas. I never thought about this. I think the next probably is to think about mental operations, of what kind of operations you can do with each thing, but it would not be so many cards. And I think in one way I think the cards have a future. In another way, I think it's also about the state or the way we process information, which cannot be outside of us. It needs to be inside, which is how do we get in the state that enables us to process the information better, which is more a spiritual thing where you need to go deeper yourself into your own process in order to go quicker with these things and basically have wisdom, because no cards will be like, there's so many different bits and pieces that you need to trust your intuition, the thing you were talking about earlier, to connect it for you and to put it in the back of your mind and not try to have control over it because it's just too much information. That's what comes to me. But anyway.
It makes sense. Yeah. Cards, by the way, I'm waiting to do something that is not cards. I don't know if it's an ego fact that I want to do something new again, or if it's an actual need of people. I'd never say that cards are the best tool. Cards are the good tool for something. Linear things, okay. Collaborative, okay. Being analogic and allowing you to work by yourself. Very true. The other good thing about cards is that you actually change the space. So the important thing about Fabula is that you lay it down and then you have an actual physical space that has changed and now represents your story, so you can actually work. And that's important because, again, then you take them in your hand, so you actually experience them. Another thing that is very beautiful is the tabletop games. So what if we make a tabletop game that actually it's not about entertaining, but it's about growing and creating? Sure, there are some of them. That's a part that I would like maybe in the future to explore. But also, who knows?
I love it. I'm interested in one for improvisation, because I like practicing it, basically, not just thinking it, but like, okay, now get on stage, get in the center of the room and do this.
Yeah, exactly. So something that forces you to live, because Fabula forces you to think, something that forces you to do. That would be beautiful.
I'm truly in. And I started working. The improvisation thing that I was telling you about is exactly this. It's just not. So basically, I have all the components, like the atoms of the game, like the chaos that you were talking about. Now I don't have a structure that puts it together in a way that you can play. I need to be me taking the cards and say, okay, now you do this, and now you do this. And I put the meaning of the dynamic, the way we interact with it. Two last questions. One is, you spoke about the kind of crossroad you were at, which is there was professor in front of you, and then there was the entrepreneurship. I feel you're still at that crossroad. I was going to ask you what's the next one, but you're still there, right?
Yeah. There's no next crossroads. Now you have to choose the path. Actually, you have to pass an exam in order to become an actual teacher, and you have to perform better than other people. That's what I did last year, and I got the role. And now I am in unpaid leave from teaching, and I will be deciding next year. So that's where I am. And that's actually a decision that I've been taking the last 3 years. So it's a long process, and that's where I am. So I don't have the sight to see the future. That's my state now, and I'm embracing it. Maybe tell me, just to talk about the near future, what are the doubts that you have with what you're doing, and what are the half-baked projects that you have in stock? You have a lot of them in a room, I understood, but maybe the top one or the one that you feel comfortable talking about. Okay, we just came out with 2 new tools recently. One is on the Kickstarter right now, and the other one is Editor. And the one that that's the one that is called Bed, and it's for design. So we are now at the moment in which we stopped, and we have to decide what would be the next. We have several ideas, but none of them is very structured. I'd really like to work a little bit on a project that we've been putting aside for a long time, that is Fabula for nonfiction. We already have collaborated with a person that did some research, and that would be the kind of the co-author, but we've been halting this project for a long time. So I'll have to dive a little bit into that to see if it can make it. And that's one thing. And then there are other things. I would like to do something more, as I said, more playful, as in my personal experience, life. I'm at the point in which we'll take the decision and see what's the road, but we don't see the road yet about actual project. The road of the company and the doubts about that very quickly. The company now is solid, but we have reached a point in which growth is no longer possible unless something happens. We are considering looking for investors and considering opening up to the outside. And there comes my very doubt. That's the two of us. We've been doing this for some time now, 4 or 5 years. So we need to learn something new. And that's the main doubt. And that's the doubt that, of course, we see outside, and that's ours. So we don't want to close and to think that cards are the best thing and our business model is the best thing and we will be doing this forever. That's the risk. We don't want that, but we need to be inspired to do something different. So we need to find someone that can inspire us. Of course, everybody can inspire us, but for now, we still haven't found that. So that's the research we will be in the future.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Andrea. It's been very inspiring and interesting. I had a really good time.
Yeah, I did too, and I thank you as well, because a lot of things came, as you said, a lot of things came up, and I wasn't expecting them, but it was very good for me. It was a good practice. So I thank you also for the format that I really enjoy. So keep it up. Beautiful.
Thank you. You can find out more about Andrea and Sefirot at sefirot.it.